Ba, 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 da, da, da. Should I hold the basketball during this one? Welcome to this week's episode of the BIBLE Is That the Book for Me video series. This week we're talking about Esther. Bible. All right. So this week we're talking about Esther, and this basketball has nothing to do with the book of Esther, but it's just fun. So let's jump into the story of the Bible, which is also fun, folks. All right. So we've been going through the story of the Bible, right? We know that the people of Israel in 586 BCE, that the Babylonian Empire came in, defeated them, destroyed a lot of them, sent them into exile. And we also learned last week that in Ezra and Nehemiah, that some of the people of Israel were able to return to Jerusalem. So when those people returned to Jerusalem, the temple was restored, community was back, and it was kind of going well. But there was also people who didn't choose to go back to Jerusalem left. So because of the exile, there was Jewish people, so the people of Israel all throughout the province of now the kingdom of Persia, right? Because King Cyrus was of Persia. And that's the context for the book of Esther. No. So the book of Esther, whenever I think of it, if you grew up in the early 2000s like I did, you're thinking of VeggieTales, where I think she's an asparagus. I'm not quite sure, but that's what I immediately think of when I think of the book of Esther. But today, we're not talking about VeggieTales. We're talking about the book of Esther in the Hebrew scriptures, so let's jump in. Now, God's name isn't mentioned once, not once, in the book of Esther. That's pretty wild. But let's remember that God, even though God's name isn't mentioned, God is working behind the scenes. God is working through the people of Israel. Basically, long story short, we have this king. His wife dies. Well, he kind of kills her. And then there's like this beauty pageant. And then Esther gets chosen. Now Esther's queen. Then Esther has a cousin named Mordecai. Mordecai's a good guy, kind of. And then there's this guy named Haman. Haman's a bad guy. And then Haman tries to get all the people of Israel killed because it's not like Mordecai. And then Mordecai saves the king. And then the king says, nah. And then Mordecai creates a plan through Esther to save the people of Israel. So that was kind of disjointed. But the book of Esther, the main takeaway is that even though God isn't present, God is working in the background. God's actually there the whole time because God is committed to the people of Israel. And we see moral failings throughout the book of Esther. We see people drinking too much. We see people not following Torah. We see people straying away from Yahweh. But God is committed to his covenant people. Even though the people of Israel were failing, even though they weren't committed, God works in the background through Esther and Mordecai to save the people of Israel. God is committed to the covenant. God is committed to his people, and God is committed to creation. That's the main theme of the book of Esther. That even when you can't see God working right in front of you, God's working in the background, working through others, because God is committed to saving this broken reality. He's committed to saving the people of Israel by rescuing them and by rescuing us today for our broken reality. And I think that's it. Okay. And that, folks, was the book of Esther. Oh no, Russell, are you okay?